The Habs, on the other hand, made headlines for all the wrong reasons in the first night of the draft, selecting Logan Mailoux out of, technically he's a London Knights defenseman. He was on loan to Sweden this season because the CHL did not have a season to speak of. I'm just going to read a little snippet here so people can have a bit of context for this young man. This is an Eric Engels article on Sportsnet. With the 31st overall pick, the Canadiens chose Mailoux, who had renounced himself from the process after he was charged in Sweden with invasion of privacy and defamation. Mailoux paid a fine of $1,650 for showing teammates with SK Lejeune in Sweden a Snapchat of him engaged in a consensual sexual activity with a woman who did not consent to having such images shared with anyone. I'm just going to quickly read Mailoux's statement, his actual statement regarding when he took himself out the draft. And people may be wondering, technically under the CBA, a player cannot take themselves out the draft. But regardless, this statement was made, and here it is. Being drafted into the – and sorry, this is via Logan's Twitter account, his personal one. Being drafted into the NHL is an honor and a privilege that no one takes lightly. The NHL draft should be one of the most exciting landmark moments in the player's career. And given the circumstances, I don't feel I've demonstrated strong enough maturity or character to earn that privilege in 2021. If I were to ever have the honor of being selected, I want a fan base to be proud to welcome me to their organization. I know it will take time for society to build back the trust I have lost, and that is why I think it is best that I renounce myself from the 2021 draft. And ask that no one select me for this upcoming weekend. I feel that this would allow me to, the opportunity to demonstrate an adequate level of maturity and character next season with the London Knights in the OHL and provide all the NHL teams the opportunity to reassess my character towards the 2022 NHL draft. Regardless of this statement, the Montreal Canadiens decided to select Logan 31st overall in the draft. Immediately following the selection, they released a statement on social media. The moment that the first round had finished, Marc Bergevin spoke to the media. Trevor Timmins, after the second and seventh rounds, spoke to the media. The morning after the first round, Logan Mailoux talked to the media. And we'll get into all of that in a second here because this is a very important discussion to have. I guess, first off, what was your guys' reaction if you either saw it live or you saw the tweet or whatever, that the Habs had probably just made the most controversial draft pick in the history of the NHL draft?
So I wasn't watching the first round, but I have Elliot Friedman on notifications for every time he tweets. And I did a double read, because I didn't clue in on the name. I read it and I said, oh, okay, cool. He's been doing it all night. And then I read it again and I said, that's the guy who less than a week ago renounced himself from the draft. And I'm not entirely sure what. I was just in shock that they actually did it.
Mm-hmm. Damn.
I was really shocked too. I think that, we don't know we don't know all the details of what's been going on, but to have a statement like that, to know that there's been so much backlash with different incidents before, like we mentioned already, Mitchell Miller last year. And the one thing that really shocked me was that was already a controversial thing in the fourth round, that the Coyotes still took a chance, but to use your first round pick like that and be okay with it. And then the whole thing, I think James Myrtle was the first one, was it's not a good thing if you have to put out a statement after you make a draft choice. Mm-hmm. And again, that still was kind of, for me, in a way, it was kind of in your face type of thing. It's with Marc Bergevin, just, yeah, we're using our first round pick for this guy. We don't care what everything else says. And then it was kind of the same sentiment what the Coyotes said about Mitchell Miller, where we're going to work with him to know that he could get through this. And he's working on his character. And, that's a big, important thing for us in this organization.
Mm-hmm. Something that Bergevin said to defend the pick was his statement showed a level of regret and maturity. I can't believe that. It is the feeling is like, and I've looked at some of, like, I tried reading articles on the rest of Montreal's draft picks, and you're just like, I don't care if this guy and this guy are good picks. It soiled the entirety of Montreal's draft. Now that is not actually important. The Habs don't matter in this. Logan Mailoux doesn't matter at this. No offense, but like, and this looks bad for the NHL and hockey culture, which we're going to talk about in a second here. What's really important here, and is if you're anyone who's sort of defending this young man, is you need perspective is super important, right? So what you need to do when you're sort of thinking about the story is you put yourself in the shoes of the victim. And the way I put it in the video I made on my YouTube channel was that, yeah, Daniel's like, oh no. All right, sorry, we're back. Technical difficulties. So anyway, what I was saying, you need to put yourself in the shoes of the victim here. The girl whose the images he showed off to his teammates. And you got to think, okay, how would she feel? And very important, there's been no report so far that the Habs reached out to the victim. And when Mayu was speaking to the media, he never even referred to her as anything but the girl, which is awful. How does she feel seeing him getting drafted by a massive hockey market, a team that just went to the Cup final? Ultimately, this guy is set up like he will have a massive leg up on the average person now in the situation he's in. And listen, I'm all for second chances. You have to earn a second chance, though. It's more than just being – he was a teenager. I knew what was right and wrong at 18 years old. I mean, it's incredible to me that people are just making so much excuses. I don't get it. And he – honestly, guys – he didn't seem – now, obviously, like in something like this, and we've talked about it before, receipts. All he said in his media availability was, I've done therapy for the past couple of years. For all we know, that was court ordered. We don't know anything more. And when talked about, is there sort of a roadmap, Eric Engels asked, like about what you're going to do in the future here. He didn't have an answer. And apparently the Canadiens, since he released his statement about not wanting to be drafted, did not contact him. So they don't have a plan, clearly. So, the worst part is they went with their guy. And that's actually, I think, the worst thing is apparently other teams were thinking of drafting him too.
Yeah, in the second round.
This league, man. This league.
Just to go back to what you said there about the second chances thing, because we did have this discussion. Oh man, I'm forgetting his name. The fourth round pick, Arizona.
Mitchell Miller. Sorry,
thank you. We had that same discussion there, and I think a lot of what we said in that discussion is easily applicable here as well. Like receipts, why? This idea, and I never understand it. This idea that it's a privilege. Like it is a privilege to play in the NHL. Like we've said this before, it is a privilege to be able to play in the NHL. It's not something that anyone is just handed. If that was the case, there would be everyone would do it. Everyone would do it. It's like and especially for me, and listen, I get it. I'm a Leafs fan, but man, like I'm not anti-Habs by any means. Like just to see an organization like that who has such high standards, and I mean, you could verify that for me as well, Adam. But to have such high standards in the culture that they seem to have, and then to do this. It doesn't make sense to me. Like it's not your job to do. It's not your job to change him. Like that should be his.
See, it's funny you kind of mention that because there are two sort of schools of thought you have there. In my eyes, and it's very important people listening to the two sides here. It obviously this is not what the Montreal Canadiens should stand for. This is not the kind of stuff that a Carey Price represents. You think of Habs greats. That's not what Jean Beliveau was about. But what's concerning is that if you look at some players in the past that Marc Bergevin has been interested in, a.k.a. I'm not even mentioning Tony DeAngelo, Saba Voinov is a big one. It's ignoring the morals of it and just being like, I want that player. And it's sickening. The Habs honestly should be ashamed of themselves. Now, I don't mean to sort of shift off of them by saying that multiple teams were interested. They were the ones who pulled the trigger on it. They saw that a big need for the Canadiens going into that draft was they needed, with losing Weber and Cale Fleury in the same week, they had a massive hole in the right side of their defense in the pipeline. And we already saw that during the regular season because Romanov or Kulak were playing the offhandedness. They saw clearly it wasn't about wanting to rebuild the character. They saw a need that needed to be filled in the organization, and they saw a player who fit that mold. And they ignored everything else, like 6'3", over 200 pounds. Nastiness in his game is the scouting report on this kid. That is exactly what Bergevin wants. Didn't care a single bit, the Canadiens. And if you want any further proof, watch that clip that's going around when Marc-Andre Godin asked Trevor Timmins, I'm paraphrasing here, Logan Mailoux said he had not earned the right to be drafted. Why did Montreal feel the opposite? And there was about 30 seconds of silence. They weren't prepared. They didn't have an answer.
How do you respond to that? There's no right answer. There's no right answer to that question.
It's such a simple question, though.
Yeah.
It goes beyond belief. It's like I saw a joke. Sorry to interrupt you. Like the joke was like when a reporter asks you a question that wasn't in the PR guide or something.
Like, I don't know. And it could have just been me. But when I read Montreal's statement, first off, and everyone tweeted it, if you have to tweet out a statement after you make a pick, for the most part, that's never a good thing. Ever. And that statement that they tweeted out read to me the exact same way the Coyote statement read to me last year. And I've made my comments more than clear on what I thought about that statement.
Again, like, and I'm not dissuading anything where we look at what is the bigger issue here of a guy that clearly knows what he did was wrong. And again, he asked people, don't draft me. I know that, we don't know if that was a PR move or anything, and I think the other thing you've talked about is like other teams being interested in the second round. Like that's another thing, like what you said, Montreal made that pick, but I'm just looking at this where like, was it really worth that risk? Like you were picking 31st in a draft where it was a dartboard. You know what I mean? Like you could have, like, it's not like we're mentioning like, here are the top 5 guys. And, we just had to get him. It's at the end of the first round where there was clearly other guys who dropped in the draft. There were guys that still showed that type of skill set that they wanted on the right side, and yet they still made that pick.
Yeah, like Aatu Räty was available. Logan Mailoux was not even the consensus best player available. Now, if you look at draft list, he was projected around there, but that doesn't matter. Now, apparently some other rationale that was discussed was because of where Montreal then drafted in the second round, they didn't believe that he would be available. And it's like, and if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, what does that mean? It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Yeah. I agree. Like, that was their thinking. It was. Think of the human side of this guy. It's so simple. Like, what are you doing? It's not your fault. It's their rationale. It just doesn't make any amount of sense to me. So clearly it doesn't matter whether he was drafted in the first round. He could have been the first overall pick. He could have been the last pick in the draft. What he did is still a thing. It doesn't even, like, Mitchell Miller was a 4th round pick last year, and we still had this long discussion about it. It's regardless of where he is picked. It's this discussion that we're having. And I think I was ready, like, before the Canadiens picked him, I was ready to come on this show
and blast the league as just business-wise, they don't make sense. I'm starting to realize just this league as a whole it's just catastrophically horrible. I don't know what we're doing here, because my understanding was, I believe it was about 5 or 6 teams who had him on a do not draft list. That's there's 32 teams in the NHL.
It's baffling. The cherry on top, this is the last thing I'll say here, is the language of the first round is very particular in the fact of a normal year, they go up to the podium, a team will say normally, congratulations to the Stanley Cup champions, maybe the runners up. Shout out to Bettman finally saying something about the Habs, by the way. At this point, I kind of wish he took it back, by the way. And by the way, the look on Bettman's face after the pick was made was like, it spoke volumes. So anyway, you have that kind of stuff, right? Like they welcome the home city, they say hi to their fans. Naturally, they didn't do that because of how slow the pace of it was. And by the way, in a second, we're going to talk about the broadcast itself because many issues with the draft this year. But what was shocking to me was it gets to Montreal, and this is the dagger. We are proud to select. Is the nail in the coffin. Now, normally you would say they always do that with a pick. Yes, but the context is so important around Logan Mailoux. It's still, I'm to a level speechless. It should be ashamed of themselves, every member of that organization that went along with that pick. Ownership, if they knew, because I doubt the fact that Jeff Molson wouldn't know.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's more than just Marc Bergevin and Trevor Timmins, especially with the story, just purely from a business sense. With a story when it comes out like that, and you are now going to say, he said he doesn't want to be drafted, but we're going to draft him anyways. There's no way that Jeff Molson doesn't know. There's multiple people who have to know about this. This isn't Marc Bergevin going rogue. Like I saw people saying it looked like Trevor Timmins doesn't know. I find it, or didn't know. I just find that hard to believe that members of management and ownership would not know about a decision like this prior to it being made, especially considering the context behind it.
I remember Brian Burke, and I'm just going to talk about like how a pick is selected and how they value a first round pick. I remember Brian Burke when he was outlining, I guess, his own process of how he was managing picks. Like he mentioned that, he loved Bobby Ryan or he loved Morgan Riley as those picks. But again, like, yeah, I'm the GM, but it doesn't mean I could just, go on my own and pick these guys. Like it's like he's being held accountable by everyone else in that organization to make a decision for that one player. So I completely agree that as much as we blame Marc Bergevin, we know like how the process is. It was a collective failure, I think, by that management team.
By the way, the way it's always been around the Canadiens draft is always Timmins is the guy in charge. And whoever him and his team say they should take on the list, it's them. It was even going back to like that leaked footage of when Caulfield was drafted. Or no, sorry, they put that out. But remember their draft list got leaked. Oh. God, Timmins gets the call. Now a GM would have the final say, right. But that's just another body in the way of saying yes or no. And again, right. What makes it being in the first round even worse than in the fourth or the fifth or whatever is again the broadcast of it. And again, going back to the victim, seeing that broadcast, because she'll see the clip, just makes like she'll remember everything all over again. And it's that at the end of the day is the worst part. And I feel horrible for her.